Hello and welcome to another episode of Teppou Republic. On the last episode, Takamichi's army was dodging Sado naval artillery fire, successfully defeating their army without taking any casualties from the enemy's heavy artillery bombardment. Then, over in the west, Takahisa managed to sneakily take Mimasaka from the Yonago forces, further extending our western front into Imperial territory and then settling down to consolidate. Then Compton was attacked by an enemy force that included an ironclad. The Satsuma had brought up an ironclad of their own which threatened to actually destroy Compton after so many victories. Things were going badly when his companion ship exploded at close range, damaging his ship severely, meaning he was quite stranded. But luckily, with the support of coastal batteries, we managed to sink the ironclad, and the enemy support ships soon followed, allowing Compton to escape with his life. The enemy are currently conducting a large-scale invasion of Harima with 4 stacks coming in and 2 of our own stacks ready to defend, so there'll be battles there soon. There's also an invasion going on in Echigo. The Sendai forces have men moving down cross-country. I'm not sure if they're attacking Echigo or not, but something is about to happen there. Finally, we saw the Satsuma return to attack Compton yet again, bringing in some Imperial allies, meaning he now faces 3 enemy ships. We still have the coastal batteries on our side, but we're also perilously close to sinking, so we can't take anything for granted here. I am not sure the Sioux really intend to reward our brotherhood for our help. Countless ambushes foiled and weaknesses exploited, countless lives saved, but you hear nothing of the shinobi in any of their stories. But it would be against our nature to be in the stories. To mold the world unseen is a power that is its own reward. Pay no heed to any Sioux mouthpiece. Know only that your work is what the people need right now. You're right, truly right, as always. I shall think no more of it. But there is something else I wanted to say. We are no longer the eyes of the Todo family as we once were. More spies I have liaised with than ever, and not from any brotherhood. They carry sheets of paper rather than a dagger, contracts, documents to allow them to infiltrate the new powers of the market. I believe there will soon come a time when the power of those agents surpasses that of true spies. No doubt you wish to suggest that we become them. Unwise. More prudent would be to listen to them, know them, see how it is their love of money and power that drives them rather than their loyalty to their patrons. To become them would spell the end of our order. To pilfer their knowledge and combine it with ours would make our end impossible. So Compton prepares to face these enemy ships, and I didn't learn my lesson from last time he faced enemies here, because as you can see the enemy are coming in right next to my deployment zone just like they did last time, and I've actually got Compton facing his rear to this position, so now I must very frantically attempt to turn the ironclad to fire on these ships at close range. Last time, you might remember, the enemy ships didn't turn to fire at me, so the fact they came at me from behind actually was okay. But this time the enemy are going to attempt to fire back, so that's very inconvenient. Luckily at first they actually turned into each other, both turning in opposite directions, meaning they couldn't turn their broadsides to me straight away. Then they both mutually decided to turn to the right, so then they will be able to get broadsides. This delay means I get the first shots off, getting a few explosives. I'm aiming at the corvette because I think it's easier to take out with explosives. The frigate will take more work. The frigate is actually blocking the line of sight of the back guns on the corvette as well, which is absolutely perfect. Although the frigate's main broadside is still pretty large, you can see they just got a nice close-range barrage on my ironclad, which did a lot of damage, but luckily I happened to have the side of the ironclad that wasn't taking damage in the last battle facing the enemy here. So the enemy aren't going to get a chance to sink me by hitting the weakened side with these close-range barrages. I'm just hoping that my explosives will be able to take out the smaller corvette before the enemy frigate does too much damage to me, or in fact before the other enemy frigate coming in from the south part of the map comes to join the battle. So the enemy's corvette manages to catch fire as a result of some of my explosive shot hitting the engine. This causes a lot of panic and they immediately surrender, so that's fine news. That corvette taking out the picture actually surprisingly quickly. So now I'm going to focus my explosives on the frigate, which as you can see is now turning its rear towards me for some unknown reason. An absolutely perfect turn of luck that means I'm going to get loads of free shots on the enemy ship and get explosives right into the stern, which should do extreme damage. Meanwhile, the enemy's other frigate is coming into range, but of course it's going to sail past all of my coastal batteries. He'll be able to damage the hull. Its hull was already very damaged. The hull on this ship as well is quite damaged, as you can see. This is just from the explosives having blown a few holes in the enemy. It seems they're actually trying to escape this area, but as they go, they take more explosives. They're already in really bad condition. They're on fire. They decide to surrender. So now it's just the enemy's frigate against my ironclad, and I'm going to have the support of the coastal guns the whole time. The coastal guns, though, are particularly inaccurate, so whether that really matters isn't quite clear. A few of them are getting shots on the enemy, though, and now and again a few standard shots are going to hit the enemy's hull, and because the enemy's hull is already so damaged, it is actually going to give me a chance to sink it without having to really have a prolonged engagement between my ironclad and the enemy ship, which is perfect because I don't want my ironclad to sink either. So a little bit later, the enemy ship floundered for a while. It went in a big circle in the center of the map, being hit by my coastal batteries all the way, and it took so much damage that it actually started to sink, and they surrender as my ironclad comes in to start giving them some more shots with explosives as well. So in the end, it's a heroic victory for Compton's forces. He has managed to hold off 3 enemy ships, only taking a certain amount of damage to one of his own undamaged sides, so still afloat and still with most of his crew and guns intact, so just about ready to face another battle if needs be. We can see the results here. Heroic victory. Our ship still has some of its crew left and some of its hull left, but really it'd be ideal if I could repair the ship. Unfortunately, the docks there are actually damaged, so I can't do it right now. Now the Sendai don't invade Echigo there, as I had expected them to do. They're actually moving south, so I'm going to have to try and play catch up with them. Meanwhile, the Imperial forces moving into Harima are stepping up their game. More and more enemies coming in. First the Hiroshima, the Okayama getting on the bandwagon, and the Takatsuki moving a force away from my ambush points east towards Setsu.
The 2 holdings look impressive on a map, but really, all we need to do is topple a few regions, and the rest will crumble. They do not have the stability afforded by Imperial culture. They lack any tradition of their own to make people long for a life under that illegitimate regime. And now, with the 2 events stalled, and their people questioning their choices now that the highs of victory have faded, a single strike into Kanai will break this rebellion from the ground up. We shall liberate our emperor, and have him lead our divine forces to raise their estates in Iga, destroy those foreign camps in Owari, and reclaim the financial centers in Omi. Victory will then, in essence, be assured.
My immediate priority now is sorting out this issue in Harima. We've got so many enemy forces coming in. We've got the Satsuma from the west, who we can't forget about, but most immediate are all these armies coming in from Owaji Island. 3 stacks to deal with. I've got 2 of my own in the area, and as you can see from these messages, the enemy are well aware of the forces I had positioned in these forests to try and intercept the enemy as they come in. So I think they're probably not going to get ambushed, and you can see this Takatsuki army has already escaped the ambush zone and is heading east towards Setsu, or perhaps towards Kyoto. I suspected they probably were going to go for the capital itself. So I need to try and stop these guys from getting away, really, because if they advance too far east, I won't have any way to stop them. So I used the closer of my 2 stacks to engage them. We're going to have a fair one-on-one fight. Their army is pretty well balanced and pretty strong, actually. They have lots of decent infantry, those rifle attendants, and they even have a nice contingent of cavalry and some decent artillery. Our army has no general, however is very elite and well trained and using the best equipment possible, so I'm hoping that in this one-on-one engagement we'll be able to destroy the enemy and have enough men left to go back and continue the fight against those other stacks. To begin with, I've got my forces deployed entirely in hiding in this forest in my deployment zone on a small hill as well, And on the other side of another forested hill is the enemy army, who have deployed pretty much just out in the open, facing off against the forest in front of them. They've got their artillery deployed as well, strangely far back from their main infantry line. A nice variety of artillery though, from wooden cannons to parrot guns. They've got light guns and mortars as well, so all sorts of different types of artillery, all ready to fire on me as I advance, which in theory I must do as the attacker. Now what I wanted to do though was try and get the enemy to attack me, as we've seen work in the past, by just firing at them with my artillery to see if it will spook them into moving. Now because the enemy's artillery is deployed so far back from their main line, my artillery is able to hit the enemy's front line without the enemy's artillery being able to respond. So in the beginning of the battle I'm going to use this liberty to just randomly fire towards the enemy's lines. Unfortunately, firing at the maximum range of the parrot guns means there's almost no accuracy, and I guess they can't even see who they're firing at, so the chance of actually inflicting casualties is quite low, and in fact the enemy didn't react at all to this sustained fire, so I ended up having to decide to advance, and the perfect place to advance to was the next set of forest right in front of me, where I can pretty much set up the same formation, also in hiding. But of course, while I'm moving between those two locations, I'm going to be taking enemy artillery fire, and you can already see we've begun to take casualties. Luckily, we're moving near to those forests, which means some of the enemy's shots will just hit the trees and explode before they reach us, or explode in mid-air. So the lethality of the enemy's artillery strikes are going to be much reduced. So most of my men are going to get across perfectly okay. Some of them can even get across in hiding right on my right flank, because there's forests joining the forest I started into the one I'm moving into now. So the plan is to just set up a defensive formation on that new forested ridge. My cavalry are going off way onto the edge of the map, also to hide in forests. The plan is to try and sneak them around the enemy's right flank later on, if I can do anyway. So now I've set up my men in this forest. They're starting to go into hiding, although the enemy is still firing at them. Their wooden cannons very inaccurate, but still managing to get a few kills on us. So once all of those guys are in hiding, the enemy artillery will stop. Most of my men have made it across. The balance bar has shifted slightly in the enemy's favour as a result of losses taken as we moved across, but nothing too significant. I realised that this unit of Yariki was actually my general and wasn't able to hide in the new forest, so they had to rush back to go and hide in the original deployment zone. Unfortunately, I had a little bit of trouble getting them into hiding, and they're taking artillery fire the whole time, because now the rest of my army is hiding. All of the enemy's artillery are firing at this one unit, so they had to rush way back towards the edge of the map to hide. Now I'm starting to set up a defensive formation on this new ridge that I've captured, and you can see this army has engineers among it, and the engineers can set up these stakes on our flanks to protect against cavalry attacks. A nice wide bank of stakes, meaning any cavalry attack coming towards our right flank might manage to get itself impaled on those stakes, or at least be forced to return back temporarily. You can see the enemy have saber cav here, so they're the main threat of doing this, and those saber cav will of course rip through our lines if they manage to get into contact, so those stakes should be doing good work there. Now I decided to retry the strategy of spooking the enemy into moving by firing at them with artillery, which took a very long time to move up into this new position. But now that it was here, I thought I'll try and take out the enemy's artillery in one burst. I fired with all 8 of my guns. They all completely missed. I didn't hit any of the enemy's artillery pieces, and now of course the enemy can fire back at me, but very luckily the enemy's parrot guns didn't seem to have line of sight on me, so their best artillery unit couldn't fire, and their mortars were out of range, so their second best unit wasn't going to do anything either. Their light guns were having trouble getting their guns to fire, so mainly it was just their wooden cannons firing at me. I tried to have my parrot guns kill the enemy parrot gun crew with shrapnel, but they proved surprisingly resistant to that shrapnel and it didn't work. I was also trying to sneak my cavalry around the enemy's right flank, but unfortunately this unit here came out of hiding because they are slightly too wide, as you can see, for the forest. So I noticed this and tried to get them back into hiding by unloosening their formation so that more of them would be covered by the trees. Unfortunately, all the while, the enemy's artillery are completely pounding this unit. Again, all of their artillery units were focusing on this one squad because everyone else was in hiding. I had my other parrot gun stop firing by now, so this was the only target for the enemy. And unfortunately they're having some real trouble getting into hiding. It looked like now they were successfully in hiding because there seemed to be a pause in the enemy's firing. But it turns out the enemy were just all reloading simultaneously. Another volley of enemy artillery reveals to me that they still know my men are here, so I have to just run away. My plan to sneak around the enemy has been cooled off by the enemy's heavy pressure from artillery, and I've lost a good number of horsemen attempting to do it as well. Probably about a third, maybe 2/5 of this regiment were lost trying to sneak up like that. So I guess the lesson is, don't mess with enemy artillery, especially when you can't definitely hide. Now the time limit on the battle is starting to run out, so as the attacker, I must now simply attack the enemy's position full frontal. All of my units are rushing out of hiding and charging down the hill to set up a line battle position opposite the enemy. The enemy very cleverly immediately fall back as I do this. This lengthens the distance I have to move, gets them closer to their artillery support, and it reduces the extent to which I can use the hill I'm on to get multiple lines of fire on the enemy. Unfortunately, the enemy didn't fall back quite far enough to completely remove that advantage. You can see I'm still planning to set up 2 lines with sharpshooters in the back who are going to fire over the top of my main line. The main line itself, as it comes into position, is going to take artillery fire. It's not going to be totally deadly because as they're moving, they're going to be a little bit harder to hit. But of course, once they set up, they're going to be really in the line of sight of the enemy's artillery, especially because they're slightly uphill. The enemy have direct line of sight. They don't have to fire over the top of their own men. They can see me exactly. The enemy also have sharpshooters, have already engaged with our men, and in places their main line is engaging with us. You can see the mortars ripping our lines apart there. Our guys are not happy about this, but now it's finally time to take revenge. Our line's in range. I tell them to go into kneel fire mode and start just bombarding the enemy's line with shots. Our guys are very accurate, you might remember, and they also have about rank 4 of training. So overall, a very effective unit. The enemy's rifle attendants are very good as a unit, but are also untrained. So hopefully we can gain an advantage. But already our units are starting to shatter. My right flank goes immediately because the enemy's artillery is just too heavy for these men to bear. That is not a good start to this part of the line battle. What? Who gave that order? They know better than this. He's the elite of our forces. Give a man the best rifle money can buy and train him until he can use it blindfolded, and you'd think he might by then be an effective soldier. Guess those foreign officers forgot to tell them the part where you have to actually fire your weapon at the enemy, not give up as soon as they look like they might know which end the shot comes out of. This rout could start a panic along the rest of the line. Everyone follow me. We attack now to break the enemy with our charge, or die in the attempt. A bit of good news is that on the enemy's right flank, my revolver cavalry have closed to really close range and are completely destroying the unit on the end of the enemy's line with their close range, super fast fire. I also have my Yariki ploughing into the enemy's artillery to try and stop them firing. I really need to do that because, as you can see, my left flank is beginning to break, parts of the center as well now falling back, mainly because the enemy's accurate mortar fire, relatively close range, is tearing us apart, and here you can see light guns are just punching holes in our lines and causing yet more men to fall back. We've already lost half of our main line infantry, and the fight's been going on less than a minute. The enemy's general and his heavy cavalry attacked our weakened right flank, but I responded with spears and my own cavalry, led by my captain, to try and defeat him, so we've managed to hold him off. Another general was on the way though. We have a unit of our own infantry firing at them. I told them to fall back, run away from the enemy's charge so that I could have some Yari attendants come down to try and hold the charge off. Unfortunately, some of them did get through and will engage my line infantry, but we have a numerical advantage here, so we should be able to defeat this enemy general. Now, because the actual main line battle was going quite badly, I had to rely on my cavalry attack on the enemy's right flank to break the enemy. My revolver cav are doing okay fighting in melee against the enemy. My Yariki have been wiped out, although they did manage to take some enemy cavalry and artillery with them, so they've done their job. You can see the enemy's center is actually now just a pile of bodies, because very rapidly the enemy had to reform to advance towards my line. Because they defeated my first line and the second line was further back, they weren't able to fire straight away, and so my sharpshooters were wiping them out in the center there, plus my artillery is pounding their center as the fight goes on. So the enemy are actually taking really heavy losses, even though, as you can see here, the center of my line is completely gone. We're pretty much down to this one unit on the flank, which is holding on against the enemy. Luckily, it's being supported further forward by these stormtroopers who have rushed up to point blank range to destroy the enemy with their shotguns, and they did very well, demolishing a couple of the enemy regiments, although taking about half of their unit as casualties along the way. At this point, the battle manages to turn in our favour because the enemy are actually taking too many losses and they've been completely outflanked. Their artillery was destroyed by my captain leading a cavalry charge. The enemy was somehow defeated. That battle seemed like it was going really badly the entire time until suddenly we won. Basically, we were taking a lot of losses, but so were they. So in the end, the enemy's army was destroyed, and because our forces actually routed really early on, even though the losses look bad, a lot of our men will survive to fight another day. So here on the battle results you can see we only actually lost about 40% of our army despite it looking a lot worse. The enemy lost pretty much everything. So excellent news, but of course we really needed to defeat them without taking heavy losses because these stacks are going to need to fight against more enemies very soon, and this stack probably isn't in ideal shape to fight another enemy stack one-on-one. Plus now it can be attacked by the two enemy stacks just to the west. If it is, it could be destroyed. I wondered whether I should leave my artillery behind and send the men into hiding to try and avoid that, but I ended up deciding I'd face a better chance making a stand with what I had and the artillery if the enemy did attack, so I'm going to take that risk. Now switching over to the eastern battlefront, you can see the Sendai didn't attack Echigo as I had previously assumed. My forces on the bridge to defend against them were not required. It seems the enemy are going to go south towards Kosuke, taking winter attrition all the way. You can see it's quite a strange army they're moving down as well. It's got loads of cavalry in it. It seems they intend to do some sort of cavalry rush once they reach battle. But anyway, I had to move Tananao back from the border of Fukushima. He was going to attack Fukushima as soon as winter ended. But now that Kosuke is under threat, there's really nothing I can do to stop the enemy from ravaging my newly captured eastern provinces if they do take it. So Tananao is going to have to cool off his attack and start moving back. The enemy will take 2 turns to reach Kosuke, so it's plenty of time for me to set up defences. Meanwhile, Takamichi, who is moving north through Echigo, is actually going to be able to get towards the border of Fukushima. On the way, I'm going to push this small Sendai group off the road and I'll destroy them as well since this is an opportunity. But yes, Takamichi is now relatively close to the border of Fukushima since he is on the edge of Echigo province. He's actually closer than Tananao ever was. So it seems the roles are going to slightly switch over. Tananao is going to come back to defend the Echigo area and Takamichi is going to push on to attack Fukushima. So unfortunate for Tananao to be denied that glory, but I guess Takamichi deserves it since he has already conquered so much. This will be a perfect opportunity for him to continue his good record. Now you might remember there was that small Matsue army which is hanging around behind our lines, seemingly indecisive about what to do and suffering attrition as a result. I've got the 2 nearby castles decked out with troops now, so it can't do too much damage in its immediate area. Over in Inaba, you might also remember I had that ambush with Kunimitsu, you can see up there, set up to lure the enemy from Hoki into an ambush if I can, and Takehisa is just going to hang around for now. I don't have any plans for him. Moving on, the Satsuma move extra forces up into the western attack on Harima, plus move their initial vanguard army actually into the province, so it seems they're stepping up the action there. Harima is under even more threat than it has been before. The Hiroshima conveniently don't attack my depleted army and just start moving deeper into our territory, so that is something. The Yonago forces in Hoki appear to take the bait from Kunimitsu. They start moving towards the castle and Kunimitsu conducts an ambush. You can see the balance bar is somewhat in our favour. I was considering fighting this one myself. The enemy does have some interesting units in this army, but in the end I actually decided, since it is a foregone conclusion, it's probably not a very important battle to be showing. There are very likely to be more important battles coming up in Harima in a moment, so we'll just auto-resolve through this one. Although unfortunately the auto-resolve actually gives a pretty bad result. I think it's just a close victory, and you can see we lost a lot of men, so it seems those enemy elite units actually fare quite well against the computer's auto-resolve. But still, not a huge problem. Kunimitsu has time to regenerate. And finally, this turn, the Okayama don't attack my depleted stack in Harima, so that's good news at least. Going to be hard to keep all knowledge of this from the papers. We need to take the angle that we are letting them in as part of a plan to surround and consume them once they are away from any hope of reinforcements. Most people will believe something like that. In the meantime, send word to prepare defences at Setsu and Kyoto. And in Kyoto, tell them if you need to, they can levy troops to hold the walls. This directive must be kept from the papers at all costs. I say it not lightly. Only because the Emperor is of prime importance would I press our citizens into service. But few will see it this way. Now we get some news that it seems certain elements in our population have been harassing some Westerners, and in particular some people have been murdered, and now I have two options. I can hand these guys over to the Westerners to deal with them, or I can deal with them myself, which seems to involve, from the description, not really doing very much at all. I decided to turn them over because of course the Westerners are my only available trade partners at this stage, so I don't want to do anything to offend them. So now you can see the situation in Harima and Setsu is getting pretty bad. We've got a number of stacks which seem to be forming a line heading into our core territories and apparently ignoring Setsu. Even the leading squad, which has lost almost all of its men, is still continuing on its mission. Very strange. But actually, before we deal with that, we have to deal with the invasion coming west into Harima. We've got two Satsuma stacks and perhaps an Okayama stack coming in as well, and Takayuki is pretty much going to have to deal with all of them on his own. So it's time to get started against the first stack. It's not a particularly powerful stack, but it does have some decent units in it, and it also has a ranged advantage over us in that their ordnance rifles outrange our power guns. But of course, once we get close, we will be able to take the artillery advantage because we have more guns. So here's the enemy army forming up across the field from us. They are going to defend their position, and here are those ordnance rifles. You can see they're actually limbering them up, so they intend to move them rather than fire as the battle starts. I think it's probably because they're out of range of me, so they decided they're just going to sit in limbered mode until I come into range, and then they'll unlimber them again. So I started firing a couple of shots at the enemy, which prompted them to start moving around. Basically, I was firing manually using the first person view on the power guns, which allows you to massively exceed their effective range by just firing straight into the air. But of course it's hugely inaccurate. I did manage to get a couple of hits on the enemy using this technique, and of course the fact that I was firing at them and making them move around was somewhat useful. At least it got them to move their formation, and while they were doing that, I could be moving my formation up. I need to pull my power guns into range. My overall strategy right now is to try and distract the enemy's artillery with these cavalry, pulling them up onto the hill, because I knew the enemy would get the first shots off in an artillery skirmish, but I also knew that in a prolonged battle, just because I have more guns, as I said, I should be able to beat the enemy, that is if I have a bit of luck on my side. So as I approach, you can see the enemy starts getting their ordnance rifles ready. These rifles are essentially slightly less powerful versions of power guns that are just a lot more accurate and can fire further. They also move a lot faster on the battlefield. So the enemy are going to begin their attack on me. Unfortunately, they did not engage my horsemen as I expected. They fired right at my most valuable unit, a fine choice. My US Marines, right in the center of the line, take the volley. Many of them seem to survive the initial hits, but still it's surprising they can hit us even at their maximum range. But I'm just about to stop, and once my army stops, I'll be able to set up my power guns to start firing back. Of course, the enemy are going to have time to get multiple volleys against my US Marines. You can see another one comes through, hitting the line directly, perfect accuracy, destroying these men and knocking a hole in my formation. Not good. I need to fire back as soon as I can. I ordered my power guns to fire at the enemy's ordnance rifles using shrapnel shot, the hope being to destroy the crew rather than attempting to destroy the artillery pieces themselves. That seems to work, also taking out a whole bunch of enemy troops who were moving across the blast zone at the same time, so we kill most of the ordnance rifles crew. The few survivors come off the guns and then suddenly rout, so we've got rid of them. This means the enemy now has nothing that can stop me from just bombarding with my parrot guns for the rest of the battle, and that of course means they have to attack, which is extra good because that will mean they leave behind their mortar crew and just have to attack without it. So I'm going to try and get some revenge for my own losses by just trying to hit these regiments with the parrot guns, although as you can see it's pretty difficult to hit them because we're firing at the really maximum range of these parrot guns. But still, the enemy are going to have to attack us, and we can take the defender's advantage, which we'll be seeing next time. So that's all for now. We'll continue to hold against this massive Imperial counterattack next time on Teppou Republic.